All right, good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us for, I think it's our fifth non-consecutive annual Seder Night Insights. And the idea really is to have sort of rapid fire, different personalities in our community, share a couple minutes of ideas with us to keep our Seder fresh and so that we can have new ideas and new perspectives and not just hear from one person, but hear from a plethora of different traditions and ideas and thoughts. One of the core ideas of the Seder is that we retell the story from so many different angles and so many different vantage points, from people who are experiencing it in that moment, to people who are reflecting on it, to people who are imagining what it was like and already dreaming about a future redemption. And so in order to sort of capture that, we put together this. We have a star-studded lineup tonight, and we're very excited. Most of them need no introduction, so we're not going to stop between each one. Each one can introduce themselves, and invite you to follow along, take some notes. Feel free to follow up with them afterwards, and we're going to dive right in. We've asked them all to keep it to 5 minutes, which is probably the hardest challenge of this, but we don't want our divrei Torah to turn to chametz, so we're cutting them off not at 18 minutes, at 5 minutes. We're going to start the evening with our Yoetza Halacha and community scholar, Ruthie Braffman Shulman, who we welcome back from her maternity leave, wish her a mazel tov, and we're excited to have her with us. Ruthie, we turn the floor over to you.
All right, and the clock starts now. So there is, the whole Seder night is centered around the positive mitzvah, the mitzvah aseh, to tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. This grand evening about the Exodus. There's a lot of emphasis, and you can, even if you Google like Passover Seder, the first 10 hits are all about children, because the pasuk says, "V'higata levincha," you should tell your children by Yom Hahu Lemor, on that day, Ba'avor zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeiti mitzrayim. This is what God did for us when we left Egypt, when we left Mitzrayim. And so there's so much emphasis on how to engage the children so that the children will ask. And I didn't have time to get it out of storage, but we have the masks with all the different plagues. Even when the kids are asleep, we still use them, all these different ways of engaging children. However, the mitzvah still applies even when it's someone sitting at the Seder completely by themselves, which unfortunately did happen a lot 2 years ago, specifically when COVID hit. But in general, people weren't able to be with family or be with children, or they don't have children. The mitzvah still applies. Even adults have to retell the story and to experience it themselves, to engage in the Seder. And Rav Melamed actually has this beautiful point where he notes that the obligation to study Torah in general comes from the pasuk of teach it to your children in Devarim. You should teach it to your children and you should speak it to them. But the Gemara in Kedushin actually says the first step to teaching your children is for you to teach yourself. And it's for each of us to engage in Torah, to feel connected to Torah, to learn what makes us feel passionate and feel connected to Hashem. And that's the first step in teaching children and in our obligation of Torah. So therefore, even if there's a primary mitzvah of telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim as passing on the tradition to children, that first step really is that all adults should really engage themselves and should feel connected themselves to something that night, something that's going to challenge their thought, make them think more, feel inspired. It's really hard when, if you're making Pesach, certainly you're so wrapped up in the cleaning and the cooking, or if you're having guests to hosting, not to take that moment to stop and prepare for the Seder. But if there is one thing that you can try to connect to, it's certainly, it's incumbent upon all of us, we deserve it, to feel inspired and to connect. What's fascinating to me is that the Seder is set up to engage every type of learner. So in the education world, they have different categories of how people learn and how they process information. And the Seder actually hits on every single type of learner. So there's the auditory and musical learner. So we have to tell the story and we have to hear the story. And then there's tons of songs the entire night. There's also the visual and spatial learner. We have the Pesach Seder plate and we have to look at it. And we have to say the matzah and the Pesach matzah and maror. We also have the verbal learner. Again, we have to speak the story. We even have the logical and mathematical learner, where we talk about the number of plagues and then if it was multiplied and how many affected them, and it's all of the different math problems. The physical or kinesthetic learner, which is we take the vegetables and we dip them and we take our hands and we wash. And certainly in different minhagim, when people actually walk around and do something and they literally physically reenact the story. And then the last two categories are the social and interpersonal learner, which is the whole mitzvah of you invite people in and you create a whole seuda with other people. But then there's also the solitary and intrapersonal learner, that each person should try to engage in some way and feel, whether it's having fun or feeling connected, each person should figure out what it is that's going to connect them to the Seder night. So I wanted to just give a couple of suggestions. How am I doing with timing? I've got like 1 more minute, so I'm going to finish up in 1 minute. A couple of suggestions on engaging in the Seder night, some of them a little more thoughtful, and I'm going to end with some fun ideas as well. The more thoughtful ideas, in addition, so you can always everyone chooses their own Haggadah and goes along with that, but you can just ask questions to yourself and to everyone sitting around you. Questions of reflection and conversation. So before or after the Manishtana, you can ask, what is different about you this year compared to last year? But at the end of the Seder, when we talk about Lashana Habab Yushavlayim, you can go around and people can talk about where you want to be next year, or what do you want to accomplish in your next year? What is something proud that you accomplished this past year? In the section of Arami Oved Avi, which goes through the different psukim and then the midrash that expounds upon it, here's an example. I will put my email in the chat when I am done. I can email any of these to you. But when you say Arami Oved, I'm blanking on it. Arami Oved Avi. I'm mixing up the words. Tell you what, is that, I said that right? I'm gonna put this on baby brain. When you talk about my father was Aramean and he was journeying, you can talk about Jews and ancestry. Being a wanderer or a stranger means you never fully feel at home. So if people feel comfortable sharing, they can say, when did they feel at home? When did they not feel at home? Does this describe the situation of the Jewish people throughout history? Who are wanderers and strangers today? When it talks about Hashem taking the Jews out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, you can ask yourself and the people at your Seder, when have you felt redeemed or saved? When have you felt redeemed or saved by Hashem or by a person or by some other force? What are some signs and wonders that you have witnessed in your own life? One more general idea is to give each person at the Seder 3 slips of paper, one that says comment, one that says question, and one that spells story. And over the course of the night, everyone has to hand in a card and use that card. So either a comment, if they have a comment on something someone says, if they have a question they want to post to everyone, or if they have a story to share that was inspired by something that was told during Magid or at some part of the Seder. I do have some fun ideas I'm going to throw out there to finish off my 5 minutes. I have a couple of would you rathers that you can ask everyone at the table. Would you rather eat only maror the rest of your life or drink only salt water the rest of your life? I have a couple of others I can email them to if you want. And another fun question would be, if you were a film director and you could hire any actors you wanted, who would you have star as Moshe and Miriam and Paro, or maybe the 4 sons? Or if you could invite anyone in the world to your Seder, who would you invite and why? The last thing, which I'm happy to email anyone, is I compiled a list of parody songs. And you can hand out song sheets if you just want to break up the Seder during the serious conversation. So one of them would be to the tune of 8 Days a Week by the Beatles is 8 days or a week. Just how long is Pesach anyway? To the tune of Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious from Mary Poppins is Manishtana Halayla Hazeh. And they come up with all these other lyrics. I have some for Taylor Swift, Lion King, Wizard of Oz. So if anyone wants some parody songs, I'm happy to email you. Whatever you do, try to find a way for you to connect and for you to engage and either have fun or feel inspired. Pesach night. I'm handing it over. I don't know who's the next person.
Excellent. Rabbi